So we left off with Pontygard, talking about how it carried water to Roman cities and looking at the channels where the water be carried. There were a lot of aqueducts throughout the empire. This is not only one of them. This shows another. Pontygard is not the only one. There's many, many of them throughout the empire because they carried their water all over to cities where they could fill up the fountains and the baths and all the things it would make. And it had a huge network of these as well as roads. And I talked to you earlier about how there's a quote that said all roads lead to Rome. It's because at one point all the roads did lead there. They had a huge network of roads and connect network of carrying water. Now you say, well, why even mention this? Why is it important? Well, for their military success, for their armies to be able to travel, for communication to be able to travel, they had to have a huge network of roads. And for the lifestyle that they wanted to lead in luxury, they would have the whole networks of bringing water places to be able to create their civilization, their society, how they wanted. And it's still parts of it are still left over all these years later, because they were built so well and they were such good craftsmen, and especially in architecture, they did a lot of innovative type of things. Okay, we're gonna look at another one of their tropes that they use quite a lot. There's a number of these um, in your book, at least a couple, but we're going to look especially in detail at this one, Arch of Constantine. It's made of stone and concrete, 313 AD. So if you remember, Constantine is the guy we were looking at with this big statue up here. Where is it? This is Constantine. Okay, so that was Constantine. Same Constantine we're talking about here. And this is his arch. Imperial Roman. So we have an emperor, we have a Roman Empire, and this is very, very much again propaganda commemorating a military victory that he had when he defeated his rival Maxentius. This idea of a arch is kind of interesting. We see one in like another type of it, one in Paris with the Arc de Triomphe. These are common. There's even some in New York City based on this type of architectural style. But it's a long lineage of them arches earlier on, like Titus, the Arch of Titus, and things like that. But what they were made for is to be a parade route of commanders and soldiers with the loot and the spoils that they made with the enemies at the rear through this to march. A triumphal arch. They were triumphant in battle. So we see the later neoclassical examples, like I talked about, using this idea. There's certain things about them that's common about all of them. They were built to commemorate military victories. They always had on top, it's not here any longer, but a cast on statues on top of four-horse chariots, a part of the convention. So a chariot with four horses, and the commander, or the emperor, I should say. They're always decorated with sculptural relief, and then they have statues, sculpture sometime in the round that pops off of them. And when the people won the battle, they would have all these spoils, and some of that money would be taken to um, paid for the arch to be built. So the parade would be led by a commander and soldiers with captured enemies, and there'd be these inscriptions on the whole thing telling about the war and the victory and who was in command and what legions were involved in it, in the whole battle. It's located next to the Colosseum, at the entrance to the Roman Forum, so in the heart of the city. If you remember, we talked about the Forum being such an important place. This is very much showing its intensity as propaganda. This is the Colosseum right here. That it's really important. It's saying how great are we as Romans who are victorious in our victories and our battles. We're awesome, and it's celebrating the empire and imperialism on a really grand scale to have a victory parade into the heart of the city. and have this as a commemorative thing. You might be thinking to yourself, oh, why do that? What's this weird? Why do they have this type of stuff? Well, you go to Washington, D.C. sometime if you've been. There's all sorts of memorials to battles, and go to any big city in Europe or capital throughout not just the ancient past, but even not that long ago. There's a lot of memorials to battles. So this is really a common thing, actually. It's just that we kind of are disconnected from it sometimes. We don't think about it that way, and this seems so old. It is old, but this type of stuff still happens. So on this piece, there's pieces of it that were actual taken from other sculptures, or sculptures taken from other arches and other things. They're like spoils. So some of the reliefs are taken from Hadrian and these round ones. There's Constantine, these are originals. Then there's parts from Marcus Aurelius, and then Trajan on the end, and these statues. So they take parts of other people's architectural things and put them on here, almost like collaging on top of it. Very interesting. These round ones, these are the ones we're looking at from Hadrian. They show details of the hunt of sacrifice of a boar to Apollo. The boar is being hunted and it sacrifices here to Apollo. So there's something about the idea of the gods being a part of this whole thing, the battle, right? If you have a hunting of the boar and sacrificing it, they're part of the military victory. And on the other side, you see a hunt and sacrifice of a lion. This is a lion that's been killed and sacrificed to Hercules. So you get these ideas of power animals, symbols, a boar, a powerful animal, and a lion being killed, hunted down, and sacrificed in their victory. So there's a lot of different types of symbolism happening out throughout this whole thing. It's very, very loaded full of symbolism, victory, battle. These Corinthian columns, we remember from our Greek chapter, this is a style of column. The capital this is a Corinthian column. They're not structural, they're decorative. They're on there. So it's very much they're borrowing these type of things from the Greeks. Their columns and their capitals. Their style of them, I should say. Now we're going to look at another really interesting uh, building called the Colosseum. It's from 100 AD. It's Roman Imperial as well. It was a venue for entertainment and spectacle. So it's a giant amphitheater type of building, and it's basically the most famous amphitheater in Rome. Entry was cheap. This is it located how it would have been close to the Forum. We've looked at different pictures. This is another model showing how it would have looked. Its entry was cheap and all could attend. It was used, we say, to keep the masses happy. Bread and circuses, games, horse racing, all that. So they didn't revolt against the empire. I mean, you think about it, this is actually still used today in a lot of ways. Think about if people have just enough to eat and enough entertainment, then maybe they won't get too upset and try to overthrow the government. I mean, it's kind of in certain ways happens even now. If we have enough entertainment and stuff on TV and no one's going too hungry, then they won't get too upset and they'll let things be the way they are. Right? This was definitely happening back then. So there was gladiatorial combat. Gladiators used to fight in there, and then at one point there was public executions of Christians and wild animals. They would have them come in here and fight with each other, and people would watch the spectacle. It's made out of concrete, stone, and brick. It has a circular footprint, so you see it from above. It's circular, like what our modern day stadiums, football stadiums, and things are built off of. It's 3 stories high and has 80 entrances around it, so you can get in and out of it in a lot of locations. Originally, there would have been wooden posts at the top like this to support a canopy for shade, and this is kind of how it would have been, like that, a big shade over it. And at the bottom down here, there would have been a wooden plank floor with sand to soak up the blood and things from battle that's disintegrated now. There's currently visible the floor area underneath the basement because it's been rotted away, but it wouldn't have been. These are poured concrete vaults. So they actually poured the concrete into here to create this. It's a vaulting system based on round arches. Tunnel or barrel vaults is a row of them to create a tunnel, and then they have cross vaults that go the other way, right angle to create two identical barrel arches. See how you can see it here? It's going different directions, crossing over. This is looking up from the inside, showing you where the floor would have been in the exposed basement area. Down here, they would have kept animals and things for the combat. This is where they would have kept people. There would have been people down there as well, waiting to do all that stuff. This is kind of showing you what it would have looked like if it was all the way across it. So this is the seating area inside. You're looking at the inside of it. On the outside of it, as it rises, the walls get flattered, just kind of showing you the details of it. It's not in the greatest shape of all time, but these are the spots where the seating would have been. And these are like all the stairs and entrance ways. So how it would have been. As it rises in space, it gets flatter. Interestingly enough. And there's different types of columns we can see on the outside. If you see here, there's Corinthian columns, and up here is Doric columns. So the first floor, it goes Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian. There's different types of columns across it. So they use all three types of the capitals on there. Pretty interesting building. This is one of the more interesting buildings in the entire book, I think, actually. Also Roman Imperial. The Pantheon, I have it as one of your writing options that you can compare it to the Parthenon from Greek culture. So if you're thinking about writing about the Parthenon, the Pantheon, you want to check out this section, read more about it in your book, of course, too. You should be reading your chapters. It's from 100 AD. It's Roman Imperial as well. Designed by the Emperor Hadrian, the same emperor we've talked about. Some of his pieces were stolen, but also famous for Hadrian's Wall in Scotland, the wall that had the edge of the empire all the way at the north of England, that we will talk about a little bit at the end of the whole thing, and there's a documentary we'll watch about it. Very interesting. It's one of the largest domes that we'll see. It had a very large dome inside of it. And it's a model for a lot of civic buildings and many capitol buildings around the world. It was a religious temple in Rome to the Pantheon, all gods. This Pantheon of gods. Pantheon. So number of gods. This is the front of it. You can see on the front of it, it kind of looks like the porch of any of the many Greek temples we looked at. It has the same sort of roof, triangular space at the front. Usually the Greeks would have filled this in with sculpture like we looked at, with the marbles that were taken, the elegant marbles taken to the British Museum, for example. This one's doesn't have a lot of decoration on the outside. The majority of the decoration, I mean, it looks impressive as the porchway with the columns and the intensity of the dome and everything on the surface, but more of the focus of decoration goes onto the inside of it, which we're going to look at in the next video. But this one is brick, stone, and poured concrete. So we're going to look at the next video where we'll start looking at the decorations on the inside after I talk a bit more about this. So I'll see you in the next video.